Hi, everyone. This is Bert Dizon. I'm the co-chair of the Education Committee for RISE, and we're welcoming you back to a continuation of our series on mentors. I have the pleasure today to introduce my personal mentor, Caryn Siebert, who's also the 2020 RISE Mentor of the Year Award winner. I will let Caryn introduce herself and share a little bit about herself before we get into our questioning today. Caryn?
Well, thanks for having me. I know I'm so excited to be here virtually with you. And I guess the first thing I should do is thank RISE. I happen to have here the RISE 2020 Mentor of the Year Award. But the great thing about this is that you don't win the award just because of 1 year. It's a buildup over the course of time. And this just symbolizes something that I'm very proud of. And I thank RISE, Rising Insurance Star Executives. That's what it's all about, right?
Right.
And here I am now, Vice President of the Carrier Practice Group at Gallagher Bassett. I am one of several people doing business development in that team. And we're having a blast. We're trying things new and different. And here I am as a mentor to others, but I'm learning every single day in this new environment. So you can be a mentor and a mentee at the same time.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And learning is quite possibly the best. It's the thing that all of us need to continue to do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so as I said, we're kind of doing a series on mentorship. And so I wanted to meet with you today and ask you some questions just on your experience in your career. For example, have you ever had a mentor during your career?
No, I'm just kidding. Of course. No, of course. It's interesting because as I was growing up, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I would say one of my first mentors were my mom and my grandmother, right? Because in my neighborhood, if you were a woman, you were going to be a school teacher or an accounting professional or maybe a nurse, all very good, noble professions. Beyond being a nurse, I thought, well, I could be a veterinarian until I kept passing out in lab class and eventually decided that, I have a gift of gab, so I'll become an attorney instead. So both my mom and my grandmother both encouraged me to go ahead and to try that and to not be afraid to fail, which is always interesting, right? Go ahead, give it a shot. Don't be afraid to fail. Well, hello, you're telling me that I could fail, but you keep moving full speed ahead. And so I graduated from law school eventually and went into private practice at a law firm. And I had some different mentors. It's kind of funny. I had mentors at a law firm, one of whom was teaching me how to select wine at cocktail parties, right?
And that's an important skill.
Think about that, right? So anyway, but I would say true mentors as I moved on in my career were the transition from a law firm into being an assistant general counsel. A gentleman early on, Rich McCarty, was one of my early mentors. And he kind of said, look, same thing, right? Don't be afraid to fail. You have to give it a shot. So I was commuting from New Jersey to Atlanta once a month, and then from New Jersey to Chicago once a month. And I was assistant general counsel to 2 different companies. And at the time, I had no idea what was about to happen, but eventually both of those companies got sold. And I was asked to be general counsel of one of them. And he said, you have to take a chance. If you don't take good, appropriate risk, you'll never advance. And here we are in the insurance industry. And what do?
Right.
Risk. It's all about risk, managing risk. And I still stay in touch with him, to this day. And then I've had other mentors, Courtney Smith, Scott Crevens, I could go on, and then I'll forget somebody like the Academy Awards. But I think the important thing about mentors and then being a mentor is making sure you're being in a position where you can be your best self and taking that chance. Over the course of time, those mentors eventually become your board of advisors. so
Okay.
that when you do have a challenge, maybe you don't need to be quote unquote mentored anymore, but now it's time for an important decision. And so you
Right.
consult with them as a board of advisors.
It's a very good point. That's a very good tip as well. Um, what, as a mentor, obviously as my mentor, I don't know how you could possibly have ever had anything with me, but what challenges have you faced being a mentor or being a leader in your career?
Well, I mean, challenges of being a leader. I mean, I think as a female, when I think about back in the 80s when I graduated law school, um, I'm not sure what grade you were in back then, but but I think one of the things was that early on in my career, people didn't think I would be mobile. They thought, oh, well, she's a woman, she's gonna, have children down the road. She won't want to work full time. She's not taking her career seriously. She went from a big law firm to going in-house. And so she wants the easier path. Well, in-house didn't become the easier path. It was a different path.
Right.
And then eventually became an assistant general counsel, a general counsel. Well, I think that once I actually went ahead and got divorced, I did become a lot more mobile and I took chances and I moved to Chicago. I was promoted into a different position when the company got sold to General Electric. At GE, I went through green belt and black belt training, right? So I took a chance there. And I think as long as you're showing that you're willing to sometimes take a step backwards to take a couple of steps forward,
Right.
and that's probably some of the advice that I've given to yourself or to even to other people who I've mentored is, sometimes you have to remember this is a marathon, not a sprint. So where is this leading down the road? And I think one of the challenges is following that advice myself, like sometimes going,
Right.
okay, you were a CEO nonstop 10 plus years straight. Take a time out, slow it down. What are you doing next? And how is that going to further your career down the road? So it's different, right? It's different being a CEO of a company that's under 100 million to being a vice president in the carrier practice of a 6,000 person company,
Right.
900 million a year, part of, a $6 billion overall publicly traded company. It's just night and day difference. And that's not good or bad. It's just different. And it offers different opportunities and fun opportunities.
Right. Okay. Caryn, how do you describe yourself as a leader? Or how do you think others would describe you as a leader?
It's funny, right? Because those are two different questions.
Right. True. Very, very true.
I will tell you that one of the things that I did in thinking about this, and I'm looking down because I grabbed a book, it's called Words of Wisdom from Women to Watch. And back in like 2010, I was named one of Business Insurance Women to Watch. And in 2016, 2017, they asked about a dozen of us to each write a chapter of a book. And it's not a book called How to Be Successful. It's a book called Words of Wisdom. I mean, we're passing on words of wisdom. We're trying to motivate people, think about things differently. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, reading this book. So to answer your question, one of the things I found in here, Bert, I think you'd appreciate it. It says that I'm known as a leader who tactfully dispenses direct and actionable feedback, is open and honest with others without being intimidating. Now, I might have to say usually there, and deals head on with people, problems, and prickly situations. So those were the words that I wrote several years ago. And I think they still hold true. I think that's the kind of leader I am. I think that I take like a consultative approach where I'm asking for different vantage points. I'm including a lot of different people, different stakeholders in the process, and then trying to lead us not to a definitive, here's what should be, but more towards a what could be. And when you think about what could be, it's a lot more fun because then people get to brainstorm, they get to think through different scenarios. And then even the preconceived notions in my own head as a leader can change and can evolve so that we can get to, a better outcome. So I would say that in the end, though, if no one's willing to make the call, then I'll go ahead and I'll make the call.
Right.
It might not always be right, but I'll make the call. We'll move ahead, and then we can change direction along the way. But at least now we're moving in a direction, hopefully towards a great solution.
Nice. Okay. What do you think is the most valuable asset of a leader?
The most valuable asset, I think the most valuable asset is to not give the person the fish, right? Give them the fishing pole, which means you have to be a good listener, right? A good listener who is asking those kind of probing questions to get the person to think through a little bit more what direction they would like to go. I think one of the most important traits is not to get to the end and say, well, here's what you should do, or here's what I would do if I was you. And instead to embrace having that dialogue, to think about the possibilities, to think sometimes like what I know now, like if I knew then what I know now, but don't force that upon your mentee. Let the mentee get there on their own. And if they fail, be there to say, okay, that's okay. What did we learn along the way? Right. It's not, maybe it wasn't you that failed. Maybe it was the process, or maybe something changed along the way and it wasn't something you could control. But I would think that that's really an important trait to be a good mentor, is to be there. At Gallagher Bassett, we have an expression, guard, guide, and go beyond. So when I think about a good mentor, it's someone who guides the mentee along the way, helps brainstorm, brings the best out of them, guards them against the total meltdown. If they do hit bumps along the way, you're there to help them get out of that situation and move in a positive direction.
Okay. It's good. True. I would agree with you there completely. What do you think has been your most poignant or effective advice you've ever given one of your mentees?
Well, I think what I was saying a little bit earlier about sometimes you have to take one step back to go two steps forward is really, it's good advice. Actually, I have a mentee who she actually did that. She went to a different kind of company, totally different type of part of the insurance industry. And she called me up this past weekend. She told me she just got promoted. So she's now the CFO of the company.
Nice.
Now, I mean, that was one of those just moments where you feel great as a mentor, as a friend, but as a mentor to say, wow, here's a person who is really nervous and went ahead and was able to achieve, a C-suite position now as a female executive. I think the other thing too is setting stretch goals and knowing that sometimes you won't hit them all, and that's okay, because you don't want to you don't want to be sandbagging it and say, oh yeah, I'm going to get to this level. If you set those stretch goals and you have those expectations out there, it always gives you something to be striving for. And so I think sometimes that's difficult because it would certainly be a lot easier to have a shorter goal that's attainable. But if you have a few that are the short, medium, and long term, so that you're doing both, I think you'll be in a lot better position.
Okay. It's good advice. To be honest, you've given me the same advice about taking a step or two back to make your way forward. And it's good advice. I have to agree and admit, the person you were mentioning, that was great advice for them, but it's turned out to be very good advice for me as well. So I definitely attest to that. Making the right decision, even if it's a step backwards, to put you back on the right path. I think that's it is a great thing to or to help people understand so that they can learn to grow. Um, you know, what in your experience being a mentor, what have been, what do you think are the skills that are difficult to help someone develop? Like on a personal or professional level for an individual person, what are the skills that are just easy to help mold and guide, but versus the skills that aren't necessarily the most trainable? What do you think, what do you see as the differences there?
Well, I mean, I think it's a good question, right? Because you have soft skills and you have technical skills. And so whether you're a claim professional, if you're an IT professional, you're a finance professional,
Right.
When I'm asked to mentor somebody, or when I've taken on a mentor, somebody who I see as a diamond in the rough, right? And I'm like, oh my God, this person could be so good. I don't necessarily want to know about accounting, right? I don't need to know how programming works or the details behind data analytics, right? We have professionals who do all that. So I think, you know, what I like to work on, and sometimes it's difficult, is making how to have a person make a better presentation. Okay. Or how to articulate themselves with more self-confidence. So that you're what I would call, and it's a phrase that's out there, right? You have to lean in. So why is it that if there's, you know, a dozen people in the room and a certain female or maybe a person of a diverse background makes a comment and offers an idea, and then 10 minutes later, a different person makes that same comment and they go, oh my God, that's such a great idea. And you're like, what, was I chopped liver? What happened here? I made that suggestion. So how do you articulate yourself, right, professionally? How do you come across more authoritatively, right? So that's a soft skill that you have to develop. How do you not end a sentence sounding like it's a question? Because now I'm not quite sure if you really believe me, you know what I mean?
Right.
So things like what I just did, how the audience hears you is now different. And so there's a great group that I worked with starting back in like 2004. And they do public speaking courses, and they talk about how do you interplay with the other people in the room? How do you interplay with your audience? How are you able to convey your point and persuade at the same time and know what hat you're wearing? Am I the expert? Am I the coach? Am I the authority? Am I the decision maker? Am I the mentor? What hat am I wearing at that point in time? And how do you change roles? So a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think that it's important that mentees and mentors both understand those nuances and those differences, because in different kinds of situations, you will have to wear those different types of hats and be very flexible and understanding. And for me personally, and I know you're going to agree with this, sometimes it's more difficult for me to be a team member than a team leader, because, you know, I'm used to leading. I'm used to people saying, here we go, here's what we need to do, Caryn, can you go do this and this and this?
Right.
And we just go ahead and we lead and we move forward. As opposed to, no, now there's 12 people of us on a team, and now I'm a team member. And so I have to remember, in this particular circumstance, this is the hat I'm wearing, and I have a deliverable by a certain time, and my leader is relying on it. So right. A little bit different.
Okay. I can understand that. Absolutely, I can understand that. What would you, you know, having been a mentor and having been a mentee in your lifetime, what do you think, in your perspective now, what do you think is the best piece of advice for each person that you can think of? The best piece of advice for trying to counsel someone on how to be a good mentor and how to counsel someone on being a good mentee. What would you say that advice or those pieces of advice would be for you?
Well, I think I think either way, it's a two-way street. So I would say for the mentee, to keep an open mind as you're listening and getting advice, but to also be honest with your mentor.
Right.
Because if you're not being fully honest with your mentor and you're not trusting the process, then you could get bad advice. You could get different advice. You have to be your genuine, authentic self as the mentee in that relationship to get the most out of it. And I think for a mentor, you have to remember the difference. First of all, they are not you. You're not trying to make a mini me.
Right.
You're trying to give advice. You're trying to lend your sage counsel. You're trying to guide them along. And there's also a difference for mentors between being a mentor versus stepping over that line and being a champion or a sponsor.
Okay.
And so as a mentor, you have to have the courage to say, look, I'm going to give you advice and I can help you navigate through the situation. Maybe the person's having difficulty with their manager, or they're trying to figure out how to get a promotion, or they want to be a public speaker. However, we can help mentor them along. But I'm not there as a mentor to help them get their next job and go to their boss and say, you should promote this person. Right? There's a difference. So I think that there's different responsibilities for both.
And boundaries, I would guess. Yeah.
Same food chain, right?
Yeah. Okay. And then just as a fun insight into Caryn Siebert, who's your favorite leader? Like, who would you consider your favorite or most inspirational leader in history?
Well, you know what? It's interesting. You've known me for a few years. I think you might know what my answer to this question would be, but I'm big into sports. I'm a huge sports fan. So I would say, as far as a leader, I would go with like a Wayne Gretzky, believe it or not, for two reasons.
From you.
You do believe it, right?
Yeah.
For two reasons. Number one, when Wayne Gretzky, or if you're not a hockey fan, you're sitting there going, I'm not a hockey fan. That's okay. Pick Michael Jordan in basketball. Pick whoever you want to pick in your favorite sport. Pele in soccer, that ages me. They, as leaders, right, always were keeping an eye ahead and knowing where everybody else in the field was, so that they could either take the shot themselves or pass it to somebody else to take the shot. You don't always have to take the shot, but somebody else can take the shot. The team still wins, you still score, everybody's still happy as there. But the other thing about Wayne Gretzky is he had his favorite saying, which is 100% of the shots you don't take don't go in.
Right.
So, if you're not going to pass it to somebody else to take the shot and let them get it in, then you better take the shot yourself, because otherwise you're not going to score. You're not going to advance the ball. You're not going to go ahead. So I would say from a leadership perspective and advancing your career, I look at some of those great leaders in sports, team captains in sports, as being some of my favorite leaders.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, Caryn, thank you for taking the time to meet with me today, albeit virtual. Hopefully the next time we have a meeting like this, we can do it in person. But thank you again for